The 2026 World Cup, the first in history to be co-hosted by three nations, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, was expected to become the biggest sporting event on the planet. A global football festival where billions of eyes would be fixed on the pitch and millions of hearts would beat as one. From the moment it was announced, people called it a golden opportunity, not just for football, but for the United States itself. Experts estimated the event could generate up to $40 billion in revenue, not to mention the international prestige. The US hoped to use the World Cup as a mirror of its soft power, an open, modern, and civilized nation ready to welcome the world. Cities like Los Angeles, New York, and Dallas eagerly prepared. Hotels were fully booked years in advance. Infrastructure projects launched at a breakneck pace. It all seemed to signal a dazzling new era for soccer in America. But before the celebrations could even begin, a political cloud darkened the field. The Trump administration issued a travel ban on citizens from 12 countries, along with complex visa requirements, steep fees, and a web of legal hurdles. What was meant to be a joyful reunion of the world suddenly became a thorny question. Who gets to enter, and who's left standing outside the gates? The iconic image of face-painted fans draped in flags, singing in the stands, the very soul of the World Cup, now faced the threat of vanishing. The joy of football hadn't even bloomed, and already it was stifled by politics. This stark contrast jolted many. On one hand, America aimed to prove itself as a global leader, a place where the world could come together. But on the other, its hardline immigration policies and rising entry barriers built an invisible wall, undermining the very spirit of unity that football stands for. People began to wonder, will the 2026 World Cup still be a celebration of the beautiful game, or will it become a harsh test of America's soft power, credibility, and capacity to lead? Can the values that football represents rise above the political smog, or will the whole thing become an empty stage where the game is reduced to a tool in a battle for influence? And from that very question, we're forced to confront a harsher chapter in the picture: immigration policy. Something that once felt distant is now choking the festival atmosphere at its core. When the travel bans were announced, when visa fees skyrocketed to $250, hundreds of thousands of fans around the world suddenly realized the road to the stadium was no longer a simple dream. It had become a journey blocked by an invisible wall. And that, right there, is the first shock the 2026 World Cup must reckon with. When the travel ban was enacted, along with visa fees reaching $250, hundreds of thousands of fans from around the world suddenly realized their dream of setting foot in the US to cheer for their teams had become a distant one. For many supporters, that fee wasn't just a financial burden. It felt like a cold, unspoken message. America is no longer as welcoming as it once was. In their eyes, the World Cup had always been a shared celebration of humanity, where wealth, skin color, and religion faded into the rhythm of drums and the colors of national flags. But this time, a ticket in hand no longer guaranteed a place in the stands because the gates had closed. Haunting images began surfacing in the media. Fans from the Middle East, Africa, South Asia, lining up outside US consulates only to be met with a shake of the head. Some national teams had made it to the finals, but their supporters, the lifeblood of the atmosphere, both could not follow. A World Cup with silent stands, stripped of chants and flag-waving fans, becomes little more than a stage with actors but no audience. What remains is an invisible wall, standing between the spirit of sport and the rigidity of politics. People began to ask, can a World Cup like this still be called a World Cup? The contrast became even more striking when America was placed side by side with its co-hosts. Canada and Mexico quickly adopted more welcoming policies: simpler entry procedures, faster visas, more reasonable costs. With the same ticket, a fan from Morocco or Nigeria could easily fly to Toronto or Mexico City, but might be stopped at the gates of New York or Los Angeles. Gradually, the psychology around destination choices shifted. Instead of the US, which was supposed to be the shining centerpiece, Canada and Mexico began winning the trust of global fans. It became a kind of silent competition where the US was losing its home field advantage. The social and political repercussions grew more visible. Instead of showcasing a diverse and open America, international media painted a picture of a closed-off country, building barriers and losing the spirit of inclusion that football represents. To many, this decision didn't just impact the fans, it cast a shadow over America's diplomatic message. While Canada and Mexico earned praise for their openness, the US faced heavy criticism for turning a football festival into a political instrument. It wasn't just a loss of spectators, it was a crack in international trust, a fragile thing to build and an easy one to break. Even the host cities within the US began to feel the chill. Worries emerged that the stands, once expected to burst with color, might instead feel muted. One expert noted, "The stadium may be full, but without the drums, without cultural fusion, the World Cup becomes an empty shell." And indeed, when diversity is stripped away, football loses its greatest strength, the power to connect people across borders. From here, a paradox becomes clear. Immigration policies meant to project control are turning into a double-edged sword, cutting into the very image America hoped to craft through the World Cup. This invisible wall isn't just blocking people, it's blocking trust. And once that trust begins to fracture, the ripple effects spread far beyond the pitch. From empty stands, the story begins to touch deeper issues: infrastructure, trade, and even global supply chains straining under the weight of policy barriers. Because a World Cup doesn't just need fans. It needs stadium materials, shipping containers, and goods crossing borders. And when politics blocks those flows, the real headache begins. If the fans are the soul of the World Cup, then infrastructure is the skeleton that gives that soul a place to live. But it's here that another tragedy begins to unfold. Stadiums that should have been completed on schedule, massive LED screens that should have lit up brilliantly, rows of comfortable seats that should have been ready to welcome tens of thousands, all of it has been held back by a tangled and chaotic supply chain. Imported steel from Canada sat idle at ports for weeks due to strict customs inspections. Shipments of plastic seats from Asia were delayed by new tariffs that drove up costs. Even LED boards from South Korea, an irreplaceable technology, were left waiting in storage, stalled by red tape and policy roadblocks. As a result, many key construction projects have fallen into a state of limbo. In Dallas, one stadium had to swap out high-grade materials for cheaper alternatives just to stay on schedule, raising concerns about quality and safety. In Los Angeles, contractors issued repeated warnings about the risk of not completing the auxiliary stands before opening day. Every delayed concrete pour, every seat left uninstalled, every unlit screen, these aren't just technical problems. They're scratches on the national image. Because in the world of sports, an unfinished grandstand can become a symbol of stagnation, prompting the question, can the world's leading superpower really pull off the world's biggest sporting event? But the problem doesn't stop there. The global supply chain, the lifeblood of a smoothly run World Cup, has now become a source of dread. Shipping companies complain that rising costs have made them reluctant to take on World Cup-related contracts. Construction sponsors worry that delays will damage their brand reputations by associating them with a tournament marred by infrastructure scandals. On the stock market, shares in several materials suppliers have dipped, gradually but consistently, reflecting a broader loss of investor confidence. It's a domino effect, cascading from politics to economics, from the border straight to the construction site. People are beginning to realize a harsh truth. Football isn't just played on the field, it's also in the shipping containers, in every block of steel and every seat bolted to the stands. A single political decision can disrupt an entire supply chain, and with it, shake the confidence of millions. Because the World Cup, more than any other event, is a global stage where every eye is watching, and every small detail can become a powerful symbol. If a stadium gate fails to open on time, it's not just a technical mishap, it's a message about a nation's dysfunction and delay. In that context, what worries observers most isn't just the concrete and steel, it's the trust of strategic partners. Because when sponsors, the names that bring the money, the branding, and international credibility, start to hesitate, the problem is no longer just a few late construction projects. It becomes the sign of a quiet but powerful retreat, a wave of capital shifting away from the US in search of safer ground. And that's the next chapter in this story, where football must grapple not only with crumbling concrete, but with financial confidence that's cracking day by day. In every World Cup, sponsors are considered the financial lifeblood of the tournament. Names like Emirates, Visa, Coca-Cola, and Adidas don't just pay to have their logos on banners or jerseys. They invest in image, in the belief that they're aligning their brand with a global, iconic event. But as the US becomes an increasingly risky and unpredictable player, those money flows have started to retreat quietly. The once booming promotional campaigns have been replaced by caution, restraint, and discreet negotiations about redirecting budgets toward Canada or Mexico. Co-hosts now seen as safer, more reliable partners. What's causing these corporate giants so much concern? It's policy risk. For them, a World Cup isn't just a ball rolling on the field, it's the assurance of full stadiums, strong TV ratings, and effective global exposure. But now, with America's image marked by immigration walls, delayed infrastructure, and the looming absence of international fans in the stands, brands are starting to ask themselves, are we investing in an empty stage? Does a commercial aired in a half-full stadium still hold value? Can a global campaign without a diverse, multicultural crowd still captivate the world? For corporations, image is an asset, and they cannot afford to tie that image to chaos. Behind closed doors, meetings have taken place, where marketing executives from multinational companies sit around tables, not to plan the next big campaign, but to calculate just how much budget to quietly pull out of the US market. Some decisions have already been made silently. Instead of pouring tens of millions into stadiums in Los Angeles or New York, they're diverting those funds to Toronto, Vancouver, or Mexico City. There, fan attendance is guaranteed, media operations are smoother, and most importantly, they don't have to worry about a sudden immigration order changing the rules overnight. What's more alarming is how silent this exodus has been. No press releases, no bold statements, just cut lines in contracts, scaled back campaigns, and billboards quietly disappearing from American stadium plans. To the public, the World Cup is still being gloriously advertised, but insiders know the flow of capital into the US is no longer what it used to be. And when brands pull back, America doesn't just lose money, it loses trust. And trust is the cornerstone of soft power on the global stage. In international politics, sometimes losing money isn't as damaging as losing face. A nation can make up financial losses from another budget, but the trust of the corporate world is not easily bought back. Once global brands begin to see the US as an unstable investment, it's not just the World Cup that will suffer. Every future international event will come under scrutiny. People will remember an America where sponsors no longer felt safe investing. And from these quiet, cautious withdrawals, a new geopolitical consequence begins to take shape. Because while the US loses financial backing, over in Zurich, FIFA's headquarters, other closed-door conversations have started. Contingency plans are being discussed, including one chilling scenario, moving the entire match cluster out of the US, placing the full organizational weight on Canada and Mexico. For FIFA, the top priority isn't salvaging a country's reputation, it's ensuring that the World Cup happens in full, packed stadiums, global audiences, and unwavering excitement. And to ensure that, they are quietly preparing a Plan B, a backup that, if executed, would deliver the most devastating blow yet to America's credibility, not just in football, but on the international political stage. At FIFA's headquarters in Zurich, closed-door meetings are becoming more frequent. On the table now are not just organizational plans, but urgent contingency proposals labeled Plan B. In the shadowy corridors of global football power, whispers have begun to circulate about a once unthinkable possibility. The 2026 World Cup could be scaled back in the US, or even moved entirely to Canada and Mexico. Not because FIFA wants to strip America of its moment, but because the organization understands that above all else, the tournament's credibility must be protected. A World Cup with empty seats, delayed infrastructure, and a lack of diverse fans is no World Cup at all. And FIFA, at any cost, must safeguard the brand it has spent nearly a century building. Internal reports paint Canada as a safe bet. Its streamlined visa system, stable political climate, and proven sports infrastructure, tested in Winter Olympics and the Women's World Cup, all position it as a capable alternative. Cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal are deemed ready to scale up operations in under a year. Meanwhile, Mexico, with its rich footballing heritage and legendary stadiums like the Azteca, brings a deep-rooted passion and proven capacity. Its electric crowds, fervent atmosphere, and trust from global fans make Mexico an emotionally compelling option. From FIFA's standpoint, if the US continues to be plagued by political instability and immigration barriers, shifting the full responsibility to its two neighbors is entirely within reason. What makes this scenario even more striking is that it's not just about football. It's a direct blow to America's global standing. A nation that once called itself the leader of the free world, that promoted the World Cup as a showcase of its soft power, now risks being sidelined. It's not just about the billions in lost revenue, it's about the collapse of an image. When the world sees Canada and Mexico stepping up more effectively, the question won't be, should the US host the World Cup? But can the US still be trusted to host any major global event? It's a slow erosion of credibility that no PR campaign can patch. Behind the scenes, FIFA officials also fear that a failed 2026 World Cup in the US could leave a stain lasting for decades. From the Olympics and global sporting championships to international summits, America would be met with doubt. Because soft power isn't just measured by Hollywood films or tech giants, it's about the ability to create a shared stage where the world can gather. And once that image is broken, the magnetic pull of America fades with it. That looming risk is precisely why FIFA has already prepared the necessary paperwork. With a single signature, the entire operational map could shift. For an organization as global as FIFA, relocating host duties is not without precedent, but if it happens to the United States, it would be one of the most symbolic decisions in sports history, a signal of waning influence that even Americans might struggle to comprehend. And if that scenario does become reality, the impact won't stop at FIFA's headquarters or the football stands. It will ripple directly into the daily lives of millions of Americans. Hotels once banking on full bookings, restaurants and bars dreaming of a windfall, construction workers hoping for short-term employment, small businesses counting on international foot traffic, all will be struck by an unprecedented economic and social shock. Because when the World Cup leaves, it doesn't just take the ball with it, it sweeps away the dreams of host cities, leaving behind empty spaces that may never be fully filled. And that right there is the next chapter of this unfolding tragedy. The economic and social fallout began to surface the moment host cities realized their dreams were at risk of falling apart. Los Angeles, Dallas, New York, once brimming with visions of millions of tourists flooding in, surging tourism revenue, and hundreds of thousands of temporary jobs, are now confronting a harsh reality. Hotels that were fully booked 3 years in advance have suddenly gone quiet. Restaurant chains and bars that invested heavily to welcome international fans now exchange anxious glances. Thousands of contract workers in construction, service, and logistics have found themselves in limbo as the promised jobs are cut back or indefinitely postponed. What makes it even more painful is that those hit the hardest are the working class. Immigrant laborers who were counting on months of overtime to support their families have lost that opportunity. Small businesses, hoping to recover after years of hardship by catering to tourist demand, now face the threat of bankruptcy. Some households, having taken out loans to invest in World Cup-related ventures, from converting homes into homestays, opening souvenir shops, to buying tourist vans, are now drowning in debt. Dreams of rising through football's economic ripple have suddenly turned into a crushing financial burden. Discontent is spreading. Local residents are beginning to lash out at the federal government, blaming rigid political decisions for stripping away a golden opportunity. On public forums, the tone has grown increasingly bitter. The World Cup was supposed to bring joy. All we see is loss. At city council meetings, local leaders are demanding answers from the White House, asking why an event that could have jump-started local economies has instead become a dead weight. These tensions are like cracks deepening in America's foundation, where football, instead of uniting, is now unintentionally widening the divide. But the impact extends beyond just economics. On a cultural and societal level, the US has lost a rare chance to tell a different story about itself. The World Cup, a global intersection of cultures, could have been the perfect moment for America to showcase its diversity, openness and its identity as a place where every ethnicity could join in the roar of the crowd. Yet, when international fans are blocked from coming, when the backdrop is stripped of color and vibrancy, America loses the chance to prove its openness through lived experience. It's a loss that can't be measured in dollars, because it's tied to trust, to emotion, to the kind of memories that could have lived on for generations. And then the unsettling question arises: if a World Cup in the US can't succeed, will other international events dare to choose this country as a host? The Olympics, global summits, world trade expos, all of them demand a stable, welcoming environment and the ability to manage crises effectively. Once America's image is shadowed by the failure of the World Cup, that trust will be shaken. And from this short-term economic and social loss, the US will face an even greater challenge, like a long-term erosion of international credibility. Because money can be earned back, but when global trust walks away, winning it back becomes a long, uncertain journey. A failed World Cup wouldn't just be a matter of financial loss or a few unfinished construction sites. It would leave a lasting scar on the world's collective memory, a moment the global community would revisit for years to come. For a country like the United States, long confident in its image as the leader of the free world, such a stumble would be especially devastating, because soft power, that elusive but essential force, is fragile. It doesn't reside in military strength or economic might, but in trust, in the ability to make other nations want to come, to collaborate, to believe. And a failed World Cup would send the opposite message, that America has closed itself off, building both visible and invisible walls between itself and the world. The long-term consequences are hard to avoid. In future votes to determine hosts for the Olympics, international summits, or global trade expos, the name United States may no longer be assumed to be a safe choice. Instead, rivals like Canada, Japan, Germany, even Mexico will rise as trusted destinations, having proven their stability and competence. Meanwhile, the US, despite its financial power and infrastructure, will find itself shrouded in doubt. And once doubt takes root, it spreads like dominoes, touching everything from diplomacy to business. The impact won't be limited to the global stage either. Within the US, such a failure could become a symbol of governance in crisis. Citizens and political opponents alike would begin asking hard questions. If the country can't even successfully host a football tournament, can it still claim the mantle of global leadership? A loss of domestic confidence paired with rising international skepticism could spiral into a reputational crisis of national proportions. And that is the most dangerous outcome of all. A failed World Cup wouldn't just cost the US a summer of sport, it would cost a golden opportunity to reaffirm its standing in the world. Instead of becoming a cultural and sporting celebration that unites humanity, America risks leaving behind a bitter memory of exclusion and dysfunction. In contrast, Canada and Mexico, once just co-hosts, could emerge as the ones who stepped up, earning international goodwill and trust. The world would remember them as nations that opened their arms, that welcomed others, that inspired confidence, values America once championed, but is now in danger of forfeiting. Money may return, stadiums may eventually be completed, but the fracture in trust will linger. Because soft power cannot be bought with dollars, it must be built with credibility and openness. And if the US allows the 2026 World Cup to become a symbol of failure, the cost won't be measured in years. It will be felt for decades to come. The 2026 World Cup was supposed to be the grandest sporting celebration on Earth, a moment where football rises above all differences to become a bridge between nations and cultures. But instead, it's slowly turning into a harsh test for the United States. From immigration barriers building invisible walls, to delayed infrastructure and fleeing capital, to contingency plans that consider sidelining the US entirely, everything points to the fact that this tournament is no longer just about football. It's become a measure of global trust, governance, and diplomatic resolve. For America, this is a golden opportunity to prove it still deserves its place as a leading nation, a symbol of openness and modernity. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword. If the country can turn things around in time, resolve its political bottlenecks, and deliver a complete, unified World Cup, it will reinforce its global standing. But if it fails, The consequences won't just be the loss of billions of dollars. Far more damaging will be the erosion of trust, a fracture in global perception that could take years, even decades to repair. Because national credibility, once lost, is never easy to win back. And so the question remains unanswered. Will the US have the courage and will to shift course and keep the World Cup within its borders? Or are we about to witness the world's biggest sporting event slip away into the hands of Canada and Mexico? Will the ball roll across vibrant, packed stadiums, or will it become a symbol of political failure? That's the challenge America must confront, not just for the world to see, but for its own people to reckon with. Ladies and gentlemen, this story still holds many layers worth exploring. What do you think? Can the US overcome this political and sporting crisis? Or will it miss out on a historic opportunity? Share your thoughts in the comments below so we can continue the conversation. And if you found this video insightful, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive. Your support is the greatest motivation for us to keep bringing you powerful, thought-provoking stories.